Yeah, so another thing that people often hear about life insurance is the type of coverage you have and whether you're overpaying or not. And so people will come and ask us, like, hey, are we overpaying for our coverage? What do we need? And the answer is it depends. It depends on your life stage. So, as you, a financial advisor, think about the different life stages that people might be in, what are some coverages that they should be looking to make sure they have?
We can get into so many technical details here. With life insurance, the thing is when you get the policy, you have to have an insurable interest at the time you get the policy. What that means is that I basically have to have a reason that I'm getting this policy on someone's life when I'm getting the policy. And so what's important is that with life insurance is it's at the time that you get the policy. It doesn't matter that for the whole 10 years you have the policy or the whole 30 years that you have, an interest in that person or for that need, but it's when you get it. So that's what's interesting, because with home and auto, it's you have it on your existing home, your existing auto. You always have an interest in that the whole life of the policy, essentially. So that's something that's a little bit different. The reason I mention that is just because it speaks a little bit to the reason you have the policies. Someone who's young and starting a family, it's really important that you have a policy in place because you're just starting to, raise a family, to have kids. You're just starting, maybe you've just purchased that first home, or you're early in owning your home. It's very common that when we're young, we don't have all this money saved, that we're starting out, living life to just pay these bills that are going to come. But as we work and as we save money, then we start to build up meaningful savings. And so now you start to ask yourself the question, well, do I need this life insurance? So in the beginning, it's yes, you need to have this in place. It's very important. Then as you go on between life stages, it's do I need to keep this? And what are the reasons that you would or wouldn't? One of the other things for young families is it's not, sometimes when couples talk about this, they may not like the idea that their spouse is going to get this large amount of money, and that it can almost be seen as like, oh, well, would I rather have you alive or not? And that sounds awful, right? But it's a thought that I think goes through people's minds of that's a lot of money if you weren't living that I would have. And the purpose of that, and just to kind of help that thought, because it's natural, we think about that. um, the purpose of that is that if something were to happen to your spouse, so if they died, you want to have money that you're going to be able to transition. You're going to be able to decide, well, are we going to stay living in the home we're living in? Am I going to go back to work? Maybe I was staying at home and I was the provider that stayed at home. Well, now I need to go look for a job because I haven't worked for the last 10 years or whatever that is. It allows time for the surviving spouse and family members to kind of transition and to find and to decide, what is life going to look like now. That's the purpose of, life insurance. And so having whatever the amount is that you decide is necessary. But the important thing is that you're allowing a time for your spouse to figure those things out, for your family to figure those things out and decide. And it may be that, they don't have to go back to work, but you're not necessarily trying to have this large amount of money so your spouse never has to work again. If they want to, obviously they could decide to, but if they don't have to, then they have the opportunity. It's just, that's really the purpose. And so sometimes I think when we talk about life insurance, it just seems like there's such big amounts, that people get life insurance for, like, wow, $1 million, that's a lot of money. But when you really think about the rest of life that needs to be lived and the expenses that might come up in that time, whether it's college, weddings, cars, whatever
Yeah.
that is, that's also a meaningful dollar amount. And so I just, it's just funny because, people will say things like, oh, I don't know if I like that you have that much life insurance on me. And I know it's kind of something that, people kind of laugh and joke about, but it is, just kind of like really explaining that and helping people understand this is why. And when you really add up what's needed, it is a big dollar amount.
Yeah.
So I guess when you talk about like professionals, you kind of said, what do they need? Very similarly, we're really just kind of building on these things. You personally need all of these things for you and your home and your family. But then also, professionals a lot of times might have employer stock, or they might have the option to buy into a business, or they might be an owner in a business, or they might need to buy out of a business. There's all of these different, again, ways or uses for life insurance. And so this is where professionals sometimes find themselves in these positions where they actually need to have money for that liability. They may have started buying into their practice and still have a note that they have to pay on. So, a loan that they're still taking out to buy into the practice. They might have 2 more years that they still need to pay on. And so that life insurance can cover that amount. And then the business, what something if you pass away, now the business can actually pay your family out your portion, but you still kind of have to pay what you're owed. It can be for a variety of different reasons, and there's different circumstances written into these notes and these buyouts for these reasons. But it's just important to note and to highlight that that's kind of the purpose that it can play for professionals, that maybe just an individual who's just kind of a W-2 employee doesn't have the option to buy into a business. That can be different for a professional in that manner.
What about for people who are retiring or are retired? Do they need life insurance, and what kind of coverage should they be looking for?
Yeah. So this is sometimes one of the biggest places for opportunities that people have, because you could have life insurance policies that, again, if you're a corporate executive, if you're a high income earner and you've worked at a company for a long time, you might have, a different buyout packages. And you also might have a life insurance policy that your employer has actually purchased for you over time. They could have been paying the premiums and you were paying tax on that as income. So now you have this policy, let's say it's a whole life policy that has all of this, built up cash surrender value or policy value in it. For some people, we'll see this amount could be $1 to $2 million of money that's set aside just in this life insurance policy. What's interesting is now you have to ask yourself, do I need this policy? So a lot of people are saying, do I even need this life insurance coverage anymore? And that is one question to ask. But the next question is, or what can I use it for? And so this is where money that you've put into that policy, up to the amount of the premiums paid, so your basis, for example, that money can be taken out tax-free because you've already paid tax on it up to that certain amount. So now we have a different type of investment account, essentially, that we can take money from in retirement. So this is where we have to ask ourselves the question, okay, do I need this insurance? Because now it feels like, all of those needs that we were talking about, whether it was retirement, which now you've already saved for if you're getting ready to retire. Your kids have probably had their weddings, most of them, and now you have grandkids. They're probably through college. And so a lot of these needs have already been fulfilled. And so now it's, do I even need this? So instead, we ask ourselves, what can we do with this? And so I think that becomes kind of one of the exciting opportunities that corporate executives or high income earners have with policies like this. So this is where I just want people not to quickly dismiss, the life insurance they have. If you're past all the needs that you initially got it for, then you just change the questions that you're asking yourself about it.
That's a great point, that sometimes you need to ask different questions instead of trying to get out of or cancel something. Can you just share some of the common mistakes that people can look out for and be on guard against